Good afternoon, good evening, this is John Paul Wright. I'm coming to you from Tokyo, Japan. This is another video on Game of Thrones, however, it's for the people who have not seen the show as well as the people who have seen the show. So if you haven't seen the show, keep listening, because I'm going to explain why I like the show and why I got into it in the first place. So when I first saw the trailers and the coming attractions and stuff like that, I was pretty heavily into The Sopranos back in the day, so I'm like, okay, this is just medieval Sopranos, and Sean Bean, the guy who plays the lead, is, going to be like the Tony Soprano guy, and cool, I'll give it a shot. And in the very first episode, we get this twist, we get this cliffhanger where it's like, oh, damn, what's going to happen next? We have two opposing families, and, well, not quite opposing, but, you could tell they're both kind of different, and they're probably going to be opposing at some point, or something like that. So anyway, something happens between these families where you're like, I gotta see what happens next week. So you watch next week, it's pretty good, it develops a little more, and by the end of season 1, they have this huge, game-breaking cliffhanger like nothing you've ever quite seen before. It's almost like the equivalent of if they started The Last Jedi and Rey died in the beginning. Like, Rey legitimately just died in the beginning. Everyone would be like, wow, like legitimately shocked. So, what Game of Thrones does is it takes the main characters and they go places in the storyline that you're genuinely not expecting, and it's definitely the best example of good subverted expectations, unlike The Last Jedi where we have bad, shock value, deliberate subverted expectations. It's also written based on events in history, so while it's not 100% original, it's very original, but the writer, George R. R. Martin, used some foundations from history and some other classic tales, but he put in his own original world, of course, so there's just like a real solid foundation of stories, and you could say like legends and myths and things kind of worked in there. And of course he's heavily influenced by Lord of the Rings, but it's not like Lord of the Rings. He has a lot less creatures and magic and fantastic monster for most of the series. In the very end it starts coming out, but most of the series is just kind of serious human versus human battles and conflicts. The other thing I like about it is there's pretty much no humor and comic relief, okay? There's funny parts, but there's not necessarily humor or like silly characters or comic relief characters. Anything that's funny is funny because there are two characters who are interacting who when they interacted they'd be kind of on opposing ends. It would be kind of interesting, and someone says something that's ironic or sarcastic or something like that. It's not because it's like made to be funny. I honestly can't think of one scene that was supposed to just be funny that was thrown in there. And, comedy's great. When I want to watch comedy, I watch a comedy. So I don't really like all this humor these days with the Marvel and the Star Wars and the Disney-owned stuff. I mean, yeah, it's okay. If it works for some people, that's cool, but I like most of it to be kept serious for the most part. The other thing about Game of Thrones is it has these characters that you love to hate, and there's just so many of them. We have queens and kings and warriors and all these people that don't annoy you in the wrong way, you just like love to hate them. A few of them come to mind if you've seen the show. Maybe King Joffrey is just some evil, wicked, twisted king. He's about 14 or something like that, and you just really love to hate this character. And his mother, Cersei, she's just really this, I don't know, you can't say evil, she's justified in her evilness, but you just kind of love to hate her to the point where you wouldn't even mind if she just, won the whole thing. And just saying, this is something, again, I don't think I really got out of The Last Jedi, the Star Wars. There's nobody I love to hate, really. It's just like generic evil characters. Yippee. The show also has a very good balance between men and women and who has power, and it really shows how you could write all kind of women that are warriors, that are politicians, that are thieves, that overpower some of the men, not all of them, because like I said, there's a good balance of power, but it just goes to show how to really write women, and George R. R. Martin has been complimented on this by many people, like, wow, you write women really good, and his response was, yeah, because women are people too. So, I don't like these deliberate female warriors out there just because there haven't been before. For example, like Ghostbusters 2016, there has never been a female Ghostbusters. That's probably why they wanted to go with that. But in Game of Thrones, nothing's deliberate, there's a great balance, and I like the women just as much as the men, and it's just a good way to show PC culture of the right way to do it without having to have all the forced BS. Another thing is this, it's also a good example of how to do a love story, because there's a lot of love stories in Game of Thrones. There's multiple characters who have love stories, but none of these stories really come out in the forefront. Like, they have to be so important, or they have to, like, change the plot and manipulate things, or people have to be rooting for certain characters to get together and things. It seems like to me, well, you know, that happens to an extent, but it's not even necessary. It seems to me that the love stories fall in place very nicely, and again, it's a good example of how to write a love story. The other thing is this, of course, the scope of the world is just immense. They've got all kind of countries, all kind of scenery, forests, lakes, river, oceans, mountains, and yes, now there are creatures, undead, dragons, things like that. Like I said, it started off not like that, but now they've got it all, basically. And not for nothing, if you've never seen it, the production value was pretty much top-notch. It's pretty much grade A. There was a few rushed episodes here and there, but like, on the whole, 90% of it is just pretty much top-notch. Seems like movie quality to me, pretty much. Also, let's not forget, George R.R. Martin has been working on the story since 1997. Well, there's actually some memes going around that he's never going to finish it, but from what I understand, it is finished. He did give the writers and producers of the show the ending. So, I mean, whether he finishes the books at this point or not, I guess it's like somewhat irrelevant to some people. I've read the books, and I've seen the shows, and I just kind of want closure on the story right now, so I'd love for him to write the books, but if he doesn't finish it, that's cool. I mean, what are you gonna do? Gotta move on. And by the way, those books are beautifully written. I've read, of course, all the Lord of the Rings, and they're different. It's really hard to say which is better, but Game of Thrones is definitely more rich as far as detail and realism and things like that. Lord of the Rings is magical in its own way, but it's a little bit more on the surface as far as the feeling you get from the characters and the way the world's described and things like that. So yeah, I'm going to end it here. Thank you guys for listening, and please consider clicking that subscribe button. If you haven't, ring that notifications bell. I got a Patreon. Check that out, and I will see you next time.